Hello everybody and welcome to the Shadow Creation Kit version 2.0. Now, the one thing that I wanted to point out, and this is very important, this has nothing to do with dynamic shadows or dynamic lighting. If you've seen this video that I've uploaded a couple of months back, this was my attempt at creating something like an Unreal Engine-esque real-time lighting and shadow creation kit. Now, if you don't know, in Unreal Engine you have this fantastic ability to design your game within the actual game level, whereas in GameMaker you need to compile your game before you can see your changes take place. So within Unreal Engine you edit all your lights in real time. You have the real-time feedback of where your lights are positioned. As you can see, the shaders work in real time, your shadows work are displayed in real time, and this saves a lot of time when you have to do some little minor adjustments when you're working on composition, when you're working on the look and the atmosphere and the ambience of your game. So my first attempt was hard-coded into the game that I was working on, and since then, this was version 1.0, since then I've redesigned and recoded the entire thing in a project of its own, while keeping in mind that this should be something that is easy to import into any blank project or any pre-existing project, and thus everything has been designed to be contained within itself, within as few resources as possible. So shadows and lighting serve a very important purpose in game level design. And it's not just something that is meant to make your game look pretty. Obviously, if it's done right, it will look pretty. There's a concept of the composition of your level design, and it borrows pretty much most of the concepts from photography, concept art, graphic design. The concept or the study of composition is the study of using colors, shapes, negative spaces, placements of your subjects, values, in order to make an image that looks interesting. And this is used a lot in game development when you design levels that look good. So as you can see, I am placing shadows manually depending on the point of origin of the light. And if I'm going to skip to where I've actually placed the shadow, as you can see, this looks way better, first of all, than just the plain old lighting. The presence of shadows, the way the shadow is placed here, it is dragging the player's attention upwards. So the player will have the need to explore what is up there. And these kinds of techniques allow you to guide the players throughout your game, throughout your level. Colors are used quite a lot in game level design to highlight points of interest. You know, if you're not lazy about it, if you're not just using a heads-up display with a box around an item that you want the player to explore, if you're smart about it, you're actually going to be using shadows and lights and colors in order to do that. So that being said, as I said, I wanted to do a quick tactile way with live feedback, something that makes you spend more time on actually designing and less time on waiting for the game to compile to see your changes take place. So this is RTG Rise, Retroactive Games Rise, that I've mentioned in many of my previous videos. I've been working on this game for quite a little while now, and the lighting, as you can see, the lighting plays a huge role in setting the feel and the atmosphere of the game. There's a lot of lights that are being used in all these different ways, but they seemed a little flat. This was, I have to say, this was a temporary solution, and now that I have a more advanced lighting system, I'm sure to be using that. And since I've already done so much work on these lights, I really needed to make a system that is quick to replace my current pre-existing lights. So this is where the tools that I used to design these levels are going to be becoming apparent. So, and the reason for those tools, so to speak. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the game maker. So this is going to be a demonstration of all the features and sort of like a tutorial of how to use them. There's a link down in the description where you can download this the package of all the files, and there are a few files. There's only a couple, like a handful of files that you need to use, which is something that I cannot say for some of these commercially available lighting engines. My goodness, when I import those lighting engines into my project, it adds like 50 sprites, a goddamn million scripts. Everything is separated. Everything is all over the place. There's all these objects that are only relevant for the demo of the light system. You know, you have a game that's ready, and you import this lighting system, and so now you find yourself spending like half hour trying to figure out which of these sprites are relevant only for the demo of the light and which are actually required by the light system to function. You start deleting and tossing, and it's just horrible. So when you open up the project, this is how you import the lighting engine, so to speak. So you have sprites and you have objects. Obviously, this right here, all I have, this, imagine this to be your game without the light system. So I have my object player, I have my room, that's my game level, and I have just a couple of tiles that I've built the level around. Nothing too serious, very basic stuff. So let's compile and take a look at what this stuff is. So as you can see, just the player-ish ask object running around. I have the active view, and this, by the way, supports a view or view-less mode, so you don't necessarily have to use views if you have views reserved for something else. So that being said, let's go ahead and close this thing, and let's import the light engine. So first of all, we have sprites, so let's go ahead and right click and maybe create a new group. Lighting. Yep. Okay, let's right click on the lighting folder and add existing sprites. So in the package of the sprites, you'll have two folders, objects and sprites. So let's select all these sprites, press on the import, or confirm the import, and now if you want to just make sure that all of your thumbnails or all your icons load up, you can open up each one of these sprites to make sure that they're all there and press OK, and as you can see, that's going to update all of the previews. So let me just tell you what these sprites are. Actually, before I'm going to do that, let's import our object. So let's go right click and create a new folder. Same thing, lighting, right click, add existing objects. So do the same thing for the objects. Import these two objects. Really handy stuff. Okay, so what are these sprites? First of all, you have the icon for the light and you have the icon for the master. That's just, you know, so that you could see what these objects are and you don't confuse them with any other objects. Handy stuff. Second of all, the sprites, there's only 3 sprites that are required by the light system. First of all, the green border, which will tell you where the sprite ends, and it's a 400 by 400 pixel object, and it's the same 400 by 400 pixel resolution as the light sprite. Now there's 2 light sprites that are being involved. The first sprite, this one's used to actually punch through the blackness of the surface that is the most common way of creating lighting. If you actually go to YouTube and you type in Game Maker Studio lights, hey, my video moved up a list. That's kind of cool. It was just yesterday when I was doing this. This video was just down here. This is my video, the dynamic shadow system. So don't click on this one then, because this one is irrelevant for this particular video. So check out this one and check out this one if you don't know what I'm talking about. Basically, with the most basic system, you have a black screen that's being drawn to the application, and then you use this kind of sprite that's transparent with the light design. This sprite is used to punch through the blackness and give it the appearance of a light source emitting light. So everything that's transparent is not going to punch through the blackness. Everything that has a color in it and it's non-transparent will punch through the blackness. And you'll see how it works. The second sprite is the exact same light as here, except it's black over white. And this one is used for two purposes. First of all, it's used to color your sprites, and second of all, it's used to give you the ability to still color your scene with light sources even though it takes place during daytime, for example, when there's no darkness to make shadows from. Now, the one important thing, these both sprites should correlate to each other. So the 400 by 400 pixels, this resolution is not too small for the lights to look pixelated when you stretch them, and it's not too big to add a huge overhaul to your compile times. And that's one thing that's an important note about GameMaker Studio. When you start working with large files, large backgrounds, you will notice that your compile time will skyrocket almost exponentially. I've had a splash screen that was 1280 by 720 in resolution, and I've rendered it, and I even tried to render all the elements separately and try to come up with a programming way of putting it all together. And that 1280 by 720 splash screen that was only about 3 megabytes, 2 megabytes in size has skyrocketed my compile time from like about 2-3 minutes to 5 minutes. Literally, that was horrible. So I had to find different ways of doing that. So these two sprites need to correlate. You can place all your light types, all your light designs into this sprite. So as you can see, I have two light designs here. The first one is a circular one. Obviously, when you look at it, the center will be assumed as the center of the light. And the second one is this kind of spotlight type looking design. So if I go over to this one and go to the second sprite, you can see they correlate. So show frame number 1, show frame number 1. These two need to match because of the way the light is designed. It's not a huge thing to do, but if you do it, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. That's the only thing that you really need to worry about to make sure that they match, the light types match on both. So black over white and white over just a transparent background. Okay, all right, so that's good. Now let's dive into your assumed level. So assuming that this is your game level, grab your objects, drop your ambient kit master, just drop it right up here. That's good. And then you can drop your light. So these are your lights. You can drop them anywhere you want. Let's add 4 lights to the scene. Actually, just want to move that light right over there. All right, that looks good. Now, all that's left is to compile the game. All right, so as you can see, the way I just, for example, you want to make a game that has the ground on top, and then all the levels inside are the ones that have the darkness and the light source, the lights functioning. So let's say if you don't want that, like I want the entire game to be dark and just the lights in it. If you're working on a different kind of game, maybe a side scroller, a platformer, so to speak, in an open world, not in closed spaces. So in that case, you can just go to your master and you can adjust the depth to be above all of your other objects. So you just adjust the Z depth of the master layer, and that's automatically going to place the light system above all your other objects. See? All right. So let's assume for this particular demo, I want the gravel or the ground to be on top, and then the levels to have the lighting in them. So I don't want the lighting to affect the ground that's on top of these levels. Okay, so first of all, you notice there's nothing really much to this light. Normally, if you're making a regular lighting system, you'd say, okay, I don't like the way these lights look. I'm going to close and I'm going to start editing the code. But if you go to your master object, this is one of the few steps that you need to do. First of all, you need to enable the light editing mode, And this is something that you need to do specifically here, because you need to make sure to disable this once you're done rendering or once you're done editing your lights. So I'm going to go ahead. There's only two variables here. There's the global light, which determines the overall darkness. So if you want to have a daytime, you set this to 0. If you want to have a nighttime scene or level, you set this to 1. If you want to have like a dusk type level lighting, then you set it to 0.5 or 0.7. You know, this is some basic stuff. So let's leave it at 1 and turn on the light dev mode to true. And that's it. As I'm speaking, as I'm doing this demo, there's already all these different additions that I want to add to this lighting system. So I'm going to add them to, like, you know, lighting systems 2.1, and I'll tell you about those in the end of the video. So suddenly all your lights have icons, and these icons are there to remind you that you are still in light editing mode. Players can still edit your lights. So let's go ahead and press on one of these lights. When you press on a light or click on the light, you edit. Excuse me, it's way too early for me to be thinking about anything. You enter the light editing mode. When you enter the light editing mode, you cannot do so for any other lights. So, good stuff. Press escape, you exit the light editing mode. You are presented with an info box, which gives you the information of how to manipulate the lights, what kind of keys you can use in order to edit the lights, and if you press Q, you can go ahead and turn that window off in order to assess your creative decisions, so to speak, without exiting the light editing mode. So first of all, you're presented with the green border, and that's the green border that you saw right over here. That is the same dimension as the sprite. So this one is very important to tell you where the actual sprite ends. So if you exit the light editing mode, you look at this light and you're like, okay, well, I think this light ends right about here, because this is the point where I can no longer see anything behind the darkness. And then you click on it, it's like, oh, okay, no, so there's all this extra space that I need to worry about when I, for example, do shadows. So that being said, if we click on the light, we are presented with the move tool, so you can move this light around. You're presented with the rotate tool, and obviously, you know, the bounding box doesn't make much sense if it's a circular light. But if I press the number, if I pull up my information box and I say key 1 sets the type, and there's the value that represents the type. So if I'm going to press key 1, as you can see, the light type changes to a different sprite, and it's going to cycle through all the different lights that you have in that sprite. And you can see which light sprite you've picked over here by the value. So now if we rotate it, suddenly you see the bounding box is kind of represents the proper angle of the light. Another great thing about this is that if you press shift, you can snap to a 22.5 degree snap rotation, whatchamacallit, the rotation snap, or rotation factor. And finally, you have the scale, which allows you to scale the light in all these different ways. If you press shift, you can scale it in a uniform fashion. So, you know, let's say this is very useful. For example, let's say you have a very stylized game and you say, okay, I want all my lighting and shadows to be at a 45-degree angle. So let me go ahead and design this light to be maybe something like a light ray, and press shift, and I'm going to go ahead and position this at a 45-degree angle. So that looks kind of cool already. That being said, you can rotate this, design it, at this point you're doing a lot of creative stuff. So let's go ahead and scale this up using the shift key and rotate it properly. That being said, let's take a look at the panel, at the info panel. So you get your X position, Y position, X scale, Y scale, angle. That's pretty much straightforward. If you wanna make two lights that are virtually identical, for example, pick this light, and then go ahead and pick this light. You say, okay, let me scale this up like this. and then you want to create the second light to be the same, you can take a look at these X scale. So X scale 0.85, Y scale 1.56, 0.85, 156. So you go over here, 0.85, 156. Here we go. And now you have two identical looking lights. Now, for the next update of this, I am already thinking of all these ways to improve the lighting system. I'm gonna add a copy feature so you can copy these things, and there's just all these additional features. But I didn't want to just continue, you know, all these things that I come up with almost as I'm doing these demo videos. I'm seeing the kind of flaws and the areas that could be improved. So I want to explain the base system, and then when updates come, I'm gonna go ahead and just talk about the updates. So, you know, instead of having this 3-hour demonstration video, I can just do videos that just cover the updates. So now you have two exact identical lights, and that's how the info box comes in useful. Now let's say you want to color this light. If you have seen some of these tutorials, you will know that the sprite, the base sprite that is right here, the transparency sprite, this sprite cannot be colored. The reason being is because this sprite is already used to punch through the blackness, so it cannot carry any color value. This is where the second sprite comes in, the black over white. Because this sprite is used for what I call is the ambience layer. So the first layer is the light layer, the second layer is the ambience layer. Now, all these values that are going from key 2 to key 8, these are adjustable values. When I was designing the system, I wanted to design a system that is quick to work with, considering that I already have like almost, I think, 30 levels in RTag Rise that I have to now redesign the entire lighting system. I needed to make sure that my lighting the shadow and lighting creation kit would be quick to work with, so I can quickly replace all these lights that were already there. So speed is important, which is why the way you added these values is you hold down the key. Let's say you wanted to adjust the intensity of this light. So this would be the light, key number 5. You press key number 5, and now notice my mouse. When the mouse is inside of this red circle, the value down here is going to be 0. So the mouse within the red circle represents 0. The further the mouse is from the center point, the larger the value is over here. So you can take a look at the value. The further the mouse is away from the center, the larger is the value. So I'm holding down key number 5 and I'm editing this value. This is what I'm talking about speed. No sliders, no buttons, no manual input, no need to move your eyeball away from the point of interest, from the light that you're working on. Everything is right in front of you, right? Okay, so key number 5 adjusts the brightness or the transparency of the light layer. Now, what about the ambience layer? In this case, the ambience layer is referred to the layer that's used with the blending mode, and we're using the additive blending mode to create some better looking lights. So I'm gonna press key 6, and I'm gonna start increasing the brightness of the ambient layer. The ambient layer, as you can see, adds almost like a glowy effect, so you have some pretty good versatility in terms of the kind of lights that you can create with this system. So let's bring it all the way up. So let's say, okay, you know what? It's a little too extreme. Let me maybe tone it down just a little bit so it still has that blowing out additive feel to it, but it's not like completely just completely blowing out all the colors behind it. So let's leave it like this. Now I want to color this. These orange values right here, key 2, key 3, and key 4, we're going to be using the hue, saturation, and value in order to build our lights. I prefer it. It's something that is way easier to wrap your head around than using the red, green, blue system. So hue, saturation, and value is very helpful in terms of just understanding how the lights are made. So value, since key 6 turns the transparency of the ambient layer up and down, value value goes from black to white. So that's the intensity of the color. You're not adjusting the transparency, you're adjusting the intensity. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. If I'm going to blow out the ambient layer all the way, so I'm going to press key 6, as you can see, value, so that's key 4. Value has seemingly the same effect, but it's not the same. The same feature. It's not the same tool from the perspective of the perspective of the code. Saturation brings up the color. So 0 completely desaturated, and 255 is completely saturated, right? So you can fine-tune these colors quite well. So fully saturated, and hue is obviously the type of color that you're picking for this light. So very useful stuff, very quick to work with. You don't spend any time in the code editor at all. You're spending all your time within your actual game. So that being said, let's say, okay, so let me just bring this ambient layer all the way up. So ambient layer set to 1. The value is down to 50, something like that. I should say that's pretty good. Saturation is let's turn down the saturation. So I still want to see some color, but I don't want it to be that prominent. So this is no saturation. This is just a little bit of saturation. You can see there's a tiny bit of color just to suggest the type of light this is. Okay, I like this. I think the ambience looks good. If I don't like the ambience, I can just turn it down a little bit. So you're going into these fine tunings of your level design. Okay, so let's say that looks good. So you're done with designing of your lights. So now let's get to the heart of this particular development kit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually default all these settings. I'm going to turn down the ambient layer. I'm going to fix, the scale, the position. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and move this light out of the way, position it right over there. That looks fine. Let's go back to this light. Okay, so let's add some shadows. The shadow, as you can see, there's the shadow option up there. You can't click on it. You have to use your keyboard in order to enter it. So let me just take this light. Let me take this light. Let me do something like this. Just scale it like that. Position the light right here. As you can see, the border is not going to be going over into this room. If I scaled it a little bit like this, you can see that the light from this light source is bleeding over into that room, and logically it's not supposed to do that. So let me just scale the light source like that. Looks good. Let's go ahead and press the E key and enter the shadow editing mode. Now when you enter the shadow editing mode, you're presented with a couple of additional tools. First of all, your mouse cursor now has a crosshair on it, and it is connected with a straight line to the point of origin of the light. Now, when you're using a circular light, you can technically use the center of your object as the point of origin of the light. So if you take a look at this light, logically you'd say, okay, the center is definitely the source of the light. However, with this type of light, you can see that the light rays kind of suggest that the light source is way up there. So logically, when you go into the shadow mode for this light, the straight line that connects to the center would not necessarily suggest the center of the light. So you're going to have to be wary of that, unless you're doing something very stylistic or you're using the tool for something other than creating a shadow. So let's go back here. Let's say, okay, so we need to make some shadows. Let's move this light source over here. Let's scale it just a little bit up so we get some extra room to work with. Now, let's enter the light editing mode. The crosshair in the center will represent where you're placing your point. Now, note the numbers that are above the crosshair. You have the X, Y position, and the XY edit. Now, what does this mean? Obviously, XY position is the position of the cursor. The edit will tell you which point you're currently editing. Using the scroll wheel on your mouse, you can cycle through the 3 points of the shadow. Since GameMaker Studio offers the function called the draw triangle, which allows you to provide the 3 XY coordinates to draw the triangle from, we're going to be using that in order to create our shadows. So let's go ahead and say point 1. So let's take a look at the way this light looks on the screen. So logically, if the red line represents the photons that are being emitted from the light source, so logically there's not supposed to be any light past this corner. So if you can use the line to assess where the light ray is traveling. So let's go ahead and press left click. We gotta press the we gotta put in the first point right at this corner. Now you can try to be pixel perfect using the mouse, but you know, if you press and click, you can freely rotate this point and kind of put it right at the corner. But there's a better way to do this pixel perfect. You have the access to the snapping tool, which you can toggle on and off using the right mouse button. You right click and suddenly you see, if you take a look at the X position on the values above the cursor, it's snapping to a 32 by 32 grid value, or the 32 pixel grid. Now, if you're not working with 32 by 32 blocks, you can go ahead and change that value within the light object. So this light object right here in the creation code, you'll have a separate script right here that will allow you to switch to what kind of grid you're using. If you're using 16 by 16 grid, that's fine. You know, if you're not working with a blocky game, you don't even need to engage the snapping mode. You can just free roam everything together. So that being said, you can snap to the X position, you can snap to the Y position, you can snap to both, and then you can return back to the free mode. So X snap, Y snap, both snap, and free roam. So let's go ahead and snap to both and position the first point right here. Left click. Good. Let's trace the light rays. So obviously, let's go ahead and toggle off the information box so I can see what the hell's going on. Okay, so obviously if we stay snapped to this point, if we go to point 2 using the scroll wheel, this really doesn't really make sense all that much. So let's go ahead and exit the snapping mode for both layers, and let's pick the snapping to the Y axis so that we could snap to this line right here but still move freely along the X axis. And let's go ahead and make sure that the light ray is just barely touching that corner. Bam. That's point number 2. Let's pick point number 3, go back to free snapping mode, and if you press and hold on the mouse button, as I said, you can just freely move the point around while you're holding down the left mouse button. So let's say, you know, let's cover a bit of area. I'd say this is good. If you have OCD, obviously, you know, you can snap to the horizontal position and just snap to a point. Okay, so that's good. But let's press enter. And as you can see, the triangle has gotten brighter. The reason it's gotten brighter is because there's a second triangle below it that represents all the existing shadows for this light. And that's an important point to note, is that each light has its own shadows. And the reason that is so is because in order to make all the shadows and all the lights behave well with each other, each light needed to have its own shadow array. That's basically the array to which you save all the coordinates for all your shadows. So let's take a look at this was version 1.0. So as you can see, there's a light in the back, and when I add the shadow, it darkens the light source in the back, and that's not good, and that's why we have a different shadow map for each one of these lights. So if I'm gonna exit the shadow mode and exit the edit mode for this light, if I'm gonna go over here to this light, you can see the shadows are not highlighted. So each light has its own shadows, and you'll see how that interacts well with the with all the lights, how they all interact together. So that being said, here we have our shadow. Let's go ahead and finish up working on the shadows for this particular light. So let's snap to this corner, place the first point, so that's point 3. Let's go back to point 2 maybe. Go back to free roaming mode. Let's place point 2. Actually, no, let's go ahead and snap to the horizontal, to the vertical position, so we can have some pixel perfect snapping. Let's go ahead and place the second point and go back to the first point, because this is point 2, this is point 3. Let's go ahead and place the first point, press enter, exit the shadow editing mode. So suddenly this starts to look pretty good. Now let's say, okay, this shadow, it's good, but let's say I'm working on a horror game. I want those shadows to really be dark. Let's pull up our info box. This is where you get the access to the last 2 editable values, the light shadow and the ambient shadow. So light shadow is key number 7. Let's press key number 7, and now the distance from the center of the light will determine the darkness of the shadow. So if you want to have some real dark shadows, if you're working on something real sharp, you can, you know, just have the contents behind the shadow, in the shadow, to be barely visible or completely invisible. You know, it depends on your depends on what game you're working on. So this gives you a lot of versatility, a lot of flexibility in the really creating the ambience of your game. So here we go. I'll leave this like this. Obviously, you know, if I have my player over here and the player has a little ambient light around him that can also interact with the lights, it depends on whatever you want to do. So here we go. This looks good. What is really cool about this is that if you go to the shadow creation mode, let's say we'll leave it like this, go back to the shadow creation mode, you can actually layer these shadows together. So let's go ahead and go to point 1. Let's go ahead and take point 2, and we'll snap to the horizontal position and place the second shadow point there, and go point 3, place the other point over there. Can't talk early in the morning, my apologies. So let's move these shadows, exit the shadow mode. Okay, so you got some layering. Let's say you have 2 lamps, one over here, one over there. You don't need to place 2 lights over here. You can just have one single light, but they both will cast 2 shadows over here. And you can do the same thing for this one. So this looks good. Let's say, okay, you know what? I don't like the way this light is positioned. Let me do something else. So let me go ahead and scale this back up. And let me, you know what? No, let me stretch this like this. Let me rotate the light and position it over here. Maybe even stretch the light a bit more. Something like that. Okay, but now suddenly these shadows don't make any sense, because since we stretched the shadow, logically the center of the light source would no longer represent the center of the light source, so to speak, the center from which the photons originate. Now it suggests that this light is stretched, so we're suggesting that the light source is somewhere way up there, somewhere way off the game area. So we're gonna go ahead, enter the shadow editing mode, and press backspace, which will clear the shadow array, so we can start making our shadows from the beginning. And this will showcase the next important tool for creating the shadows. Let's go ahead and create the shadow that would logically be cast from this particular column. Let's go into shadow creation mode, go to point 1, snap to both axes, and let's position the point 1 right there. Now I'm gonna do the next thing on purpose. I'm gonna position the second light. As you can see, I'm not following the straight light coming from the center. As I said, the light source the shadow direction need to make sense more in terms of where the shadows are coming from. Okay, so let's position the second light right there. Maybe we can even use this line that highlights the border of the light source. We can use it to draw a parallel. So from point 1 to point 2, this is going to be our parallel to this border. This looks kind of okay. And point 3, we can place it right here. Let's press enter. exit the shadow editing mode. Okay, the direction of the light looks kind of okay, but there's a problem. We have this chunk of the light bleeding over, so we still need to cover this. Let's go back to the shadow editing mode, get rid of all these points. Might even actually add a key for that for my next update for this point. So here's the thing. The problem is that since we were free positioning the points using our mouse instead of using the snapping, now we have a problem. We can't seem to position this shadows properly. So let's go ahead and put my third last point over there. So let's kind of try to see if we can do a perfect match for these for the shadow. So put the third point right over there. Something maybe like this. Okay, so just for the sake of the example, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of fuck this up on purpose. Let's do like something like that. Press enter, exit the shadow editing mode. Okay, so we have a problem. The two shadows are overlapping over each other, and they're creating this harsh line. Together. Let's say we wanted to expand on that shadow over here. So let's go ahead and pick point 2. Place the point 2 right here. Let's go to have I'm sorry, I can't fucking speak right now. God damn it. Pardon me. Excuse me. Let's go ahead to free snapping mode, and let's try to position it right there. Enter, exit, and now you have that white line that doesn't quite align very well. So we have a solution for that. Let's go ahead, press backspace, delete all these shadows. Let's redo the first point. So let's snap. There we go. Let's place the third point right around here in free roaming mode, and point 2 will obviously make parallel to this line, so make sure everything makes sense. All right, that looks good. Enter, we got our shadow. So when you have at least one shadow that is already present, that you've already created, you have access to all of the pre-existing points of the shadow. So we say we need to expand this shadow down here. So obviously, logically, if you can do if you're making the shadow, you can say, okay, we already have point 3 and point 2 aligned, so all I have to do is select point 1 and do this, and I will logically have a shadow that's or the 2 points that are already mixed. But let's say you messed it up, you moved the points, suddenly all your alignments are out of whack. So let's go ahead, pick point number 3. And now if you go and right click on your mouse, snap to X, or snap to, X, snap to Y, snap to both, and you press it one more time, you see now your cursor assigns to the last point that you used to make your shadows. And if you press Shift and use your scroll wheel, you can cycle through all these pre-existing points in your shadow. So you can now go ahead and select one of these points, select point 3, left click, good. Let's press Shift and scroll through the second point, select the second point to be edited, left click, great. Let's go ahead and go back to the free roaming mode by right click on the mouse, go to point 1, and let's go ahead and position the last point right there. Exit the shadow mode, and suddenly everything works well. There's no overlapping shadows, there's no mismatching points, there's no light bleeding through the in between the lines. Everything looks good. I can go ahead and just adjust the brightness of the shadows. All right, this looks great. Our snapping works, our shadow work. I believe I have covered everything there is to this system already in 44 minutes of this demonstration. So the last and final thing is, okay, well, if you close the game right now, all your progress is going to be lost. And this is another thing that I'm going to be improving in the next update, is how I'm going to deal with the following solution. So I'm going to go ahead and close this game, So as you can see, you know, we've lost everything. I'm gonna press the compile button again, and we're gonna do a quick lighting session. I'm gonna quickly go and demonstrate just how quick it is to design the lighting for your game environment. And we're gonna go ahead and figure all this stuff out. All right, so let's say this right here is the spawn area. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and let's do the thing that I did in the beginning. Let's make some light rays from the sun. You know, we could go with the 45-degree angle. I don't really want to do this. I want to have a bit of a more extreme angle, so to speak. Something like, well, not an extreme angle, but I don't want to have like a vertical angle. I want to have a nice angle that suggests that the holes through the ceiling are located right up there. So, okay, this looks good for the first light source. I want to add another light ray. So I'm going to use the second light. Excuse me, the second light in order to add the second ray. And I want the second ray to be a little bit smaller. I'm going to position it right above here. In fact, let me actually take the first light. Let me move it right down here. Move it right over here so that I could actually get a shadow from this corner right here. So that's fine. If I take a look at the angle, it says 325.03. Go ahead to this light and adjust the angle to 325. 325.01. That's close enough. Exit the light editing mode. All right, that looks good. Maybe I'll even stretch out the light just a tiny bit, just to get that light looking a little bit more straight. So this looks fine. Now let's color this light. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring up my ambience for this light. All right, that looks good. Let's bring up the saturation, and let's pick a color that's more, I'd say more like yellowish. Let's go ahead and blow out this thing. So yeah, that looks yellowish enough. Let's bring that down. All right, that looks good. The second light, I don't want it to be that much brighter. So let's go ahead and bring down the brightness of the color so that this light ray is more prominent. And let's go ahead and bring up the ambient layer. And let's bring up the saturation. Pick the same light. If I'm going to take a look at this, we have saturation of 124, hue 27. So 27, 124. Let's go ahead and pick a hue of 27 and 124 of value. So at this point, we can kind of eyeball this stuff together. All right, that looks good. Now, depending on, you know, right now, this is all opinion-based, all design choice-based, depending on what your game is. So you could leave this as it is. You know, my player would be here, for example, but I kind of want to follow a bit of logic. You see, the way you get to light up your entire room from your window is because the light rays from the sun don't just enter your room and end at your floor or your carpet or your wall. The photons, what they do is they enter your room and they bounce around the walls. And this is the reason why, you know, a little tiny window can light up the entire room on a very sunny day. You know, this is why no matter how many times or no matter how much you close your blinds during summer on a bright day, you're still gonna have like a bright room. So, you know, that means we can go ahead and take this third light and we can position it right over here and scale it up. So we're gonna simulate that effect of when the photons are bouncing around the walls and illuminating the rest of the scene. So I still wanna have that dark-ish, gloomy, well, I don't wanna say gloomy, but that I still wanna have my light rays to be prominent. So I'm gonna use the 5 key to bring down the brightness of the light. So that looks kind of nice. I don't want to have it too bright, so I still want to see my surroundings. If we're gonna go into the hue and saturation, let's maybe bring up the ambience just a tiny bit, and let's go ahead and pick the saturation and hue. So the hue was about 27, I believe. That's good. 26 is fine, and the saturation is about at 120 something. All right, I'd say this looks good. Let's go back to this light and turn off the info box using the Q key. Press the shadow editing mode, and let's get this shadow right down here. Point number 1, free roam. Point number 2. In this case, we can also use the border line and make our point parallel. And let's go ahead and pick point number 3 right over there. Press enter. Okay, this looks good. Let's maybe even make it just a tiny bit darker. Something like this, maybe. Okay. Now, there's this one last value that I have not explained yet, and I'm going to tell you about that in a second. So this looks good. I like the way that looks. Let's go ahead and take this light. Let's go ahead and switch to the other sprite, to the other light design. Position the light like this. Maybe scale that up a bit more. As you can see, we have a bit of that light bleeding over into the other room. So I'd say this looks okay, but I kind of want this spawn area to be more I want it to be the focal point, and that means I'm gonna go ahead and tone down the brightness of this light just a little bit. I still want it to be there like this, but I want maybe even like this, but I don't want it to be bigger than this light. So that being said, let's go into the shadow editing mode. Let's go ahead and get rid of the bleeding over the light bleeding over into the other room. So let's position our 3 points. 1, and let's go ahead and pick point 1 and place the other point over there. And now, as you can see, the shadow is kind of kicking out a part of this whatchamacallit, a part of this entire thing, part of this light. Another thing that I'm going to have to add in the update is I'm going to have the shadows layer, and I'm going to have to add the complete mask layer, something that completely gets rid of the light, which is purposed for dealing with the light bleeding over into the other areas. Because I can adjust the brightness of this of the shadow, but it needs to be a separate. As you can see, if I'm gonna adjust the shadow over here, obviously all the other shadows are gonna be affected. So this is something that I gotta implement in an update. So let's finish up with this stuff. Point 1, maybe even snap to both. Point 1, let's go ahead and go ahead and pick point 2. I'd say that's point 1. Point 1, point 2. I'd say something like that looks good. And point 3 can be positioned maybe right over there. Now that looks good. That doesn't look like any of the light is bleeding over there. Let's adjust the brightness of this shadow. Okay, this looks good. There's a little bit of shadow going over here, so let's deal with that. 1, point 2, and then point 3. That looks good. So it's still there. It still suggests that we're kind of paying attention to the way shadows are dealt in this game. So I'd say this is pretty good. Now, what happens if we're going to close the game? Obviously, we're going to lose all of our progress. So this is the final part of what makes this shadow system persistent. If you select your light and press the end key, it will prompt you to describe what this light is. And this is supposed to be a note for you to know which light you're saving the parameters to. So this is going to be our mid-level light top or large. Okay, that's fine. That being said, let's go ahead and move over here. Let's pick this light. Oh, by the way, when you save the light parameters, the light's gonna turn green as to indicate that you have saved the light. So that's really handy. Let's pick this light. Press end. This is gonna be spawn ray large. Good. This is gonna be, I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's the small ray. Okay. This is spawn ray small. And then I'm going to go to this one and say spawn ambience. I think I spelled ambience right. I don't know. I'm a poor speller. Here we go. So now we're going to go ahead and close the game. And if you take a look at your compile window, all of your parameters, all of your shadows, all of your parameters for the lights have been saved in a code-ready form. So all you have to do is go ahead and let's take a look at this. So this mid-level light large. So let's go ahead and select that, including your DS list. Copy. Let's go ahead in the creation code of the light. Paste. Just paste whatever is in here. And press OK. Then all you have to do is just go through all of these lights and paste their parameters. So this is spawn ray large, so I can go ahead and position this one over here. One note is, for the love of God, after you've saved everything, do not press compile again, because this will clear this entire screen and all your settings will be gone. You're going to have to do your entire thing again. I'm working on, as I said, the next update. Instead of doing this for every light, I'm going to give you an option to just copy the entire code into the master object, and that will take care in the creation and positioning of all the lights throughout the entire game once. So, you know, updates are to come with additional features. Small ray, spawn ray small. So let's go ahead and select this. Right click, creation code, paste that, and this one was used as an ambience piece. And yes, as I said, that's another thing, and the update will make sure that you no longer even need to position all these lights over here. So let's go ahead and press compile, and logically, now we should see all of our lights already be present in the game. Alright, look at that. All of our shadows are here. All of our lights are here. We're still in shadow editing mode, so let's say you say, you know what, I don't really like the way this looks. Maybe I want the shadows to be directed in the same area. Let's go back to the shadow editing mode, press backspace, and let's go ahead and just move the light. We can pick the circle. Let's go ahead and rotate the light, match the same angle as over here, and say, okay, that looks kind of okay. Maybe even position it right over there. Maybe have something like a small light ray kind of penetrating the area over here. If that's going to be even the case, if it can, sort of. If I'm going to just adjust the angle just a tiny bit, something like this maybe. Yeah, that looks good. So you can go ahead and adjust the brightness of the light, maybe add some brightness to that. Hue, saturation, make it a nice blue, cold light, something like that. Go to shadows, point 1, 2, 3. Select the second point. There we go. and third point position right over there, enter. Do the same thing for this, 0.1. Let me just move these points over here. So let's go ahead and kind of match the light ray so that it would be parallel to the other one. Yeah, that looks good. All right, that looks kind of cool, actually. I kind of like that. And all you have to do is just press end again. So this is mid-level light, enter, close the game, grab your saved parameters, saved creation code, go into the creation code of this light, place it right here, and compile it again, and you should have your changes saved to your level. So, you know, as I said, updates are to come. The updates will include being able to create your lights within the actual game instead of creating them in the editor, having a one single array of settings that you can just copy and paste into your entire game, into the master object, instead of doing this each one per light. Maybe I'll even implement a system that will allow you to do both, whichever you find preferable. So you can edit each one of these lights on its own. So the final thing that I wanted to tell you is how can you go about making daytime scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these lights. And let's say you just go to your master object. Obviously, here's the thing. If you want to have more than one level, and they will all be taking place in different daytime scenes, so to speak. So one will be in the bright area, one will be in the dark area. You can just copy all these scripts into the creation code. And once again, this is something that I'm going to document and probably update in the update version of this entire thing. So let's go ahead and set the global light to 0. And let's go ahead and drop the start the compile. So yes, if you want to have multiple different levels taking place at different times a day, let's say this is daytime. Okay, so I kind of want this to be, as you can see, by the way, there's no longer any light over here because there's no blackness to punch the light through. So this is where you're gonna just bring up your additive layer. All right, maybe something like this. Maybe color it, you know, let it be something blue. Scale it up. Okay, so let's place our shadows. Shadow number 1, or point number 1, point 2, and point 3. Maybe I can be even more generous with this point. Go to point 2, make it a nice big circle. Okay, press enter. And as you can see, the shadow is still interacting with the ambience layer. And this is where the last value comes in. The last value is determines how much the shadow interacts with the ambient layer. So as you can see, yes, this is a daytime scene, but you can still see that there's some interesting lighting going on here. And as I said, you know, this will allow you to add lighting to a daytime scenario. During a nighttime scenario, once again, if I'm going to go back to the creation code, if it's a nighttime scenario, the blending mode actually has a very interesting purpose as well, or the shadows for the blending layer or the ambience layer. So let's go ahead and move this layer over here. Let me do the same thing I did with the light ray. I'm gonna go ahead and make it this nice big light ray. Go to the shadow. Let's go ahead and create point 1. Point 2, make it parallel to the border lines. Point 3. Okay, this looks good. So if I'm going to bring up my ambient layer, and I'm gonna go ahead and color it into something nice and strong. Let's make it, you know, whatever. Let's make a nice teal light. So key 7. If you bring up your shadow all the way up, you can see that the the fact that the ambient layer is positioned above the light layer, it serves certain advantages, but it also has its own disadvantages, as you can see, because it's on top of the shadow of the light layer. So this is where having the parameter for the shadow for the ambient layer becomes quite useful. And this is a really cool thing. So if I'm going to bring up the shadow layer, and I'm going to bring down the ambient, or I'm going to bring up the ambient layer and bring down the shadow layer. Look at this. I'm going to slowly bring down, or I guess gradually or instantly bring down the shadow layer to 0. So you can see there's still the suggestion of something behind the shadow, but the color of the light no longer penetrates anywhere further the shadow, where the shadow is. So, you know, you can kind of play around with that just a little bit. So, lots of possibilities here for creating some really nice stuff. So, that's it. That's it. It's an hour-long demo of this entire light system. So yes, things to come. A possibility of just having all your lights being saved to one single DS list, so that you don't have to go every single light and press end in, you know, save your lights and having to import them one by one. Also the mask shadow. Make sure that the shadow to create just complete mask shadows, so that you don't you'd have a separate value for all your masks. What else? I think that's it. There was something else. I'm gonna have to watch this entire hour-long video presentation to figure out what else I said. Or you can you know, write it down in the description if I forgot something, just to give myself as a reminder. Or you can put your suggestions if you want something else out of this particular light system. I'll take a look at the suggestions, see if there's anything interesting there, and see about, you know, bringing those in the future updates. So I hope you guys will find this to be an interesting addition to your game and see some potential. You know, as I said, the core concerns of this shadow creation kit: flexibility, speed, instant feedback, and you know, resources. I mean, you don't have to deal with large pre-baked sprites. You don't need to deal with shaders, DLLs. You know, as I said, some of my previous videos explained that I want to kind of try to create systems that are universal, that don't use any proprietary dependencies like DLLs, because DLLs are Windows-only platform. If you have a feature that is run by a DLL, automatically you limit yourself to a Windows-only export. You know, no iOS, no Android, no Mac, no Linux. I'm pretty sure maybe PlayStation and Xbox would support DLLs, considering that those are pretty huge platforms, and DLLs in general are pretty useful formats. Maybe a Windows Phone, once again, I'm not sure. But there you go. Yeah, shaderless, scriptless, extensionless lighting system. And this is static stuff, no dynamic stuff. So I will see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys enjoy using this tool.